we are going to get started. So good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Colleen and I am the genealogy and community history librarian here at the library. And we are so delighted to welcome back Dr. Alejandro Benavides. I'm just going to keep this real short because we have a lot to get through today. So Dr. Benavides is the president of the Aurora Latino Historical and Cultural Foundation. And I just wanted to mention that Dr. Benavides will give his presentation. Then we will have some time for questions. Books are for sale after that at the back. Dr. Benavides has 2 books for sale, and he'll be signing them as well. And also wanted to invite you all to explore the exhibit that is in the atrium, which is curated in partnership with the Aurora Latino Historical and Cultural Foundation. So thank you so much for Dr. Benavides for being here, and please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, is that okay? Does the sound okay back there? Can you hear? No. Hello? Hello? No. There's no sound. Hello? Better? A little bit needs to be more. Hello? Oh, yeah. I sound like that.
Found your voice.
Thank you, very good. Well, I'm super excited. I wish I could see you all, but we decided because it's a Zoom, it's better that I do it this way, but I feel like I'm teaching a class, and Jerry, you know, I can't see what the kids in the back row are doing. People that what I, like me, used to call the back row syndrome, we didn't want to be called on. But again, thank you very much for your time to share with this. I think you're going to have an enjoyable time. First of all, I need to start off with thanking Colleen Kalin from the Aurora Public Library and her staff for helping me do this. Ali Latham for setting up the, helping me with the exhibit that's in the atrium. They need to be recognized. But above all, because this story pertains to Julia Perez Padilla, I need to thank the Padilla family and the Perez, Julie, Sal, and all the Padilla and the Perez family. Would you please stand up so we know who you are? Okay, they made this story possible. I'm going to take a couple of minutes. There's also some other people that you'll meet in the story, and I need to honor them too because they helped me put this story together. First of all, Marianne Frausto. She's married to Ruben, and we met many years ago when I first started teaching. She was a teacher aide in the bilingual program. So lo and behold, here we are together. There's also the Morales family. They're here. Morales family, please stand up. Big hand to the Morales family. And there may be some others here that I don't know about, but as my cousin Hector, who I also want to thank. Hector, let me stand up for a minute. A big help with this. Also his wife, Gloria, please. They were very helpful in helping me navigate as to who's who, what belongs. Because we say, well, they come from the Perez family or the Cancinos. There's some Cancinos here too. Cancinos, stand up. I heard there's a Cancino here somewhere. So they would say, well, we're the Perez family. Okay, which clan? Because there must have been about 5 or 6 clans, and they were all intermarried. But anyway, I want to make sure if I left anybody out, excuse me. Again, I want to thank the Perez family because the Padilla family, because they were so generous to lend us this lithograph of our patron saint, our Virgen de Guadalupe, That drawing or that lithograph came out of the Mexican boxcar camp when it was set up in West Eola. When it was torn down, the family was able to take possession of it. So now it sits in Sal's house. It belongs to the family, and it's in their prayer room. It's a very, very nice place. Also, Julia's violin, another very precious heirloom. And that, thank you very much for lending us and letting us tell the story. Colleen. You're gonna fix it. We had this, it was going really slick here.
Yeah, of course.
We can use the arrows. Is that okay? Oh, wait, no.
You,
There we go.
okay,
Is this gonna work now? Oh, it should work now, hopefully.
okay, we're set, okay. We're set. The title of the story is Julia's Mandolin. And you had an opportunity to see Julia's mandolin. But what I need to really emphasize is that it is not just a musical instrument. No. It is very symbolic instrument. It is a symbolic of Mexican history, which you'll hear about. It is symbolic of Mexican culture, because that's what was used for the people to sing their songs and to celebrate. The mandolin was also part of the songs that they sang to entertain the people. It was part of their religious faith and spiritual guidance. They depended on the Virgen de Guadalupe for perseverance. And with her help and their own determination, they did establish the first Mexican boxcar camp in Aurora. There were people living in Aurora, but they were scattered. It was not a community, and I'll define what a community is. It was only at the West Eola boxcar camp that there was an actual community. So yes, my friends, the mandolin is much more than a physical instrument. Much more. It represents our history, our culture. To give you a better understanding and appreciation of this story, okay, got ahead of myself. Again, this is a close-up of her mandolin, and it represents the legacy of two immigrants from Mexico. Though it was a small community, wasn't very large, 22 Boxcar, but it's a good example of a microcosm of the people who immigrated. What you see here happened throughout the United States. This concentration is on the West Eola, but this is what it represents. It represents our community, our first community, and our culture. To get a better understanding of their story and appreciation, we have to go way, way back. This particular map that you're looking at is prior to 1848. 1848 was the Mexican-American War, as you see up on the screen behind me. That Mexican-American War was basically a best way to describe it, the manifest destiny and just American imperialism. They wanted the Mexican land. So what you see there in the red dotted, that was the Mexican state of Texas and Coahuila. Texas and Coahuila. The one in orange is the California territory and all that aspect. There's a little corner that you can't see there. It's the very tip that came from the Louisiana Purchase, but it's relatively insignificant. So this is what Mexico looked like prior to 1848. The little blue arrow, that is where the story begins. It's in the state of Zacatecas, Cerrito de Aguas, which means a little hill with water, something to that. But that is where they were from. This is what I talked about, American imperialism and manifest destiny. It was Americans' desire in the United States at that time that they wanted to expand the United States as much as possible. So they fabricated a conflict with Mexico, declared a war on Mexico, And in 1848, the war did end through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And in that Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, Mexico was forced to cede over 50% of their territory. Here it is. They had no, they were forced to. What you see with the little red dots, all that territory that's in white, that is the 50%, 50-some percent that the United States took from Mexico. Down below, you see the little blue arrow. That is Aguascalientes, where the story takes place. This begins to set the background for you. I need to also emphasize that Julia and her husband-to-be Salvador, their story did not come out of a vacuum. I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain the circumstances and the crisis, the social, political, and economic that was going on that forced people from Mexico to come to the United States. They forced them. Pretty sure they all loved their country and everything, but the situation was so bad in Mexico that they really had no choice. Where is it? Well, the Cerrito de Agua, this is a satellite that's even to date. You can see that's all farm fields. It's a town of about less than 3,000. It's known as one of Mexico's ghost towns because the majority of the men do not live in where they were born. They live in the United States, and you see that quite often. They leave their wives and children at home and they come to the United States. But this is where both Julia and Manuel were born. What were times during the 1800s? This was before they were born, but what were the times like? For the most part, there was two basic social classes. There was the elite ruling class that tended to be Españoles, and there was also Criolles. And the Criolles were basically Spanish and of Spanish blood, but born in the United States. It was a very strict caste society. Far below them were the peasants. Even further at the very bottom were los Africanos, los negros, as they call them. So the peasants, the indigenous people, and los Africanos, they were at the bottom of the social stratification. So the ruling class, they ruled them, and they basically treated the peasants as slaves. And this is kind of gives you a kind of a view. You see the men there, and they're shackled to the rocks. You see the fort with Spanish soldiers guarding it, and you see the ships. And what is that symbolic? So that is symbolic of either slaves that they were bringing to Mexico, or the elite that was coming to settle in Mexico. How did the Mexican government control it? The same way they're doing it now, excuse me, to be a little bit political, but it's the same way the government is doing now. They strong arm and they intimidate the people. They basically do whatever they had to do, but they got them under control. If I don't control you, I'm going to kill you. It's that easy. They didn't have any rights. That easy. One picture here, it's a painting, painter by the name of Posada. This is an image of Mexican peasants that were forced, mainly in tobacco plantations, where they faced exploitation, violence, and lack of freedom. Consequently, many left. Those were the conditions for probably 99.9% of the people from Mexico that actually came here. They had no other choice. They did have a choice. You could either stay, and as you see to my left, that would be left, one of the things that really kept them alive and just never gave up is Our Lady of Guadalupe. As you can see here, you have people praying to Guadalupe. She is in the middle of a maguey plant. They make tequila. So that was one choice. The other choice was, we need to leave. We need to flee. There is no other choice. During the same time, probably around 1850, Mexico, about the same time that the United States, Mexico began expanding its railroad. The main reason is that they knew that they had a lot of minerals and a lot of natural resources, but they had no way of getting it out there. So at the same time, the United States was doing the same thing, as we'll go into. So we'll go into it. Eventually, the two railroads met, but we'll deal with that in a minute. When the railroad came, that changed everything in Mexico. On the left, you see songs about locomotives and trains became very popular canciones. So what you see is a selection of Mexican songs that dealt with the railroad. On the right, this is just an etching that was done. Railroad trains were very dangerous at that time. They didn't have the safety devices that they have, so accidents were always a common. The point is that it was began to become a very important part of Mexican life. They had never had that before. Either you walked or you had a burro, or you had a wife that could carry all your luggage for you. But that's just the way it was. Well, man ain't gonna do it, please. This is just a little image of how the Mexican landscape began to change around 1850, 1860, 1870. You see something new they had never seen before. The train, locomotives coming through the little villages. Here's another set. 10, 20 years later, you can see how the villages have gotten bigger. Also, the locomotives have gotten bigger. But you look around, life is still the way it is. There's a man with his burro, and that's just the way it was. The railroad also played a very significant part during the Mexican Revolution between 1910 and 1920. As you can see here, you have a lithograph of people getting on the train and soldiers, and you see a family just saying goodbye. You also see the involvement of the railroads with the rebels and the Mexican government. Railroads were used by the government, and it was a favorite target to sabotage. One of the people that lived at the Boxcar camp, Antonio Cruz, Boxcar number 7, I believe, he, as a youngster, used to, not as a youngster, but as a young man, he was in the Mexican army. And one of the things that he did is they would dynamite tracks and dynamite bridges. And they would, whatever iron they could get, they would have to refabricate bullets and parts. They didn't have the luxuries that the Mexican government had. This is where the family of the Perez Padilla starts. So we're going to start with the Perez family. This is an undated photograph of Manuel on the left, and another one, the young man, with a friend of his, undated. Kind of give you an idea of what Julia's father looked like. This is her mother. You're going to have to, I've tried to learn to pronounce that. I can never pronounce it. Help me with her name.
Eulalia.
There. Eulalia. Anyway, this is Julia's mother. She was born in 1886. You can see 2 pictures of her. These are also beautiful pictures because it just shows the style. They might have been poor. They might have come from farm families, but mothers always made sure that they were well dressed. During that time, Manuel was a farmer, according to the oral history that's been passed down. And during the Mexican Revolution, and it began in 1910, Julia's father, Manuel, he was a farmer in Zacatecas. Basically, from what I understand, it was corn that he was growing when the federal troops came in. They destroyed the corn. They took the horses and they left him. That basically made him say, hey, I'm not going to, I have to do something. So he joined the Mexican army. And he was in the Mexican army for about maybe 6 months, but he realized that the violence and the destruction and all the damage that was done at the war, he really didn't want any part of it. So he deserted. What you see here is the battle of what they call the Tumba de Zacatecas, 1914. It was located about 45 miles from where Julia was born 2 years earlier. There's a good possibility that Manuel fought in this war. Why do I say that? We know that he joined the rebels. We know that he lived in the area, and the dates kind of, they match, more or less. They match. So there is a good possibility. But what you see there is that's a turmoil that was going on in Mexico at the time. So what he did is after he came back, he needed to get out. He needed to flee. So with the help of his father-in-law, they, as you see here, this is obviously not the picture of it. What they did is through the help of the father-in-law, Manuel, his wife, and at that time, Benjamin, which we went by Ben, they hid him in the hay cart and they smuggled them out of the immediate area. From there, that's all the oral history that you hear. They left, and then next thing you know, they went to the United States. Well, I did a lot of backtracking, and basically this is what I found. And I think it's important to know and understand the difficulty and the hardships that the people had to endure. I mean, and you need to understand, or at least be aware of, they just, what do I say? Call an Uber as they get me from here to there. It was very difficult. So as you see here in the arrow, way at the south, Aguascalientes, their first leg to get to the United States was going from their hometown over to San Luis Potosí. That's where the little light green arrows start. There was a major railroad right there, the Mexican National Railway, one of the first ones to hook up to the United States border, but on the east side. And you see there, so the first leg of their journey was to Monterrey, about 125 miles, I believe, thereabouts. And so there, Manuel, his wife, and Ben lived in Monterrey for several years. He worked in an American steel mill. Then in about probably a little after 1916, I'm not sure, they decided to go to the United States. But before that, you see here, you will see Julia's mom, a lady by the name of Lupe Benavides, which no relative, but that is my aunt's name by a coincidence, a brother Ben, and Julia in the middle. As you can see, you know, they may have been poor, but they always dressed very well. During that time, these were the major, for people wanting to go to Mexico, these were the major crossings from the United States to Mexico. There was railroads, by that time, there was railroads coming from various parts of Mexico to the United States. This would be where they would first land. These are the, 2, 4, 5 major border crossings. These are also just a little bit of background. When they got to the border, where did they go? Well, as you can see, the probably number 1 was El Paso, right on the border. 2 was Laredo. That's where the family crossed. And then you have Los Angeles, San Francisco, and then, of course, Chicago and those. But those were when they got to the United States, those were the top areas where they tended to travel to. After 2 years in Monterrey, as you can see here, you can see that their travel begins to start way at the bottom. Those little red dots, that is from Monterrey to Laredo. Then they made a connection with an American railroad, probably the Acas Topeka and Santa Fe, because they were they had a lot of rails along the south. The light green dots is the train that they would have taken from Laredo to El Paso. From El Paso, and again, the oral history doesn't give you this date and this date and this date. It just says they went here, here, and here. So I just basically had to make best educated guess as to where exactly. So the blue line is from El Paso to their first stop in Colorado. From all accounts of their work, and probably his work, it was migrant workers. They worked the fields. That's what they did. Then from Colorado, they go to Wyoming. That is the orange line. Don't know how long they stayed. Wyoming is like Colorado, beets, sugar beets. My family picked sugar beets in Colorado. So it was a very popular destination for Mexican immigrants. Then somewhere along the line, they decided to go to Michigan. Also, there's, I'm not sure, cherries, peaches, and then regular agriculture. So the purple line that you see is their route from Wyoming to Michigan. They stayed there for an uncertain amount of time. Then eventually they go to Aurora. Probably through word of mouth, they learned, hey, there's a lot of jobs in Aurora. But that to give you an appreciation of how they had to travel, this is basically their journey. What type of work did they do? Well, for the most part, there was a big demand for cheap, unskilled labor. Work that basically no American wants to do. So, hey, you saw what the conditions were in Mexico. If you think, you say, well, how could they live in such conditions? Well, yeah, if you think that is bad, wait till you're in Mexico. Men, usually you saw them out with a hoe. You see them there. This must have been before they did, they changed to what they call the long hoe. In the beginning, the practice was to give the Mexican workers what was called a short hoe. Because with a short hoe, you got to bend. So when the mayordomo, when the foreman's looking, he wants to make sure everybody's bending. Nobody's standing up. So you're bending down. But that, is what's called, what's the word? There's a word for it. Stoop labor, because you're stooped over all day, stoop labor. Eventually, they made some reforms. They got toilets. That took a while. But then they began to give them long hoes. With the long hoes, they could actually stand up and do the work. Next, you see the working in the field in la pisca, as we used to call it. It was a family affair. As you see, it was equal opportunity. Older senior citizens are out there, little kids are out there, everybody helped. Basically, the ethics were, we're a family and we have the family together. I know that was the Perez and the Padilla family. We're family and we're gonna work together. That's what they basically were, the type of work that was available. Where did they live? Well, here's some examples. On the left, you see migrant camps. In the middle, you see the toilet a la fresco, if you will. They do have a little, looks like burlap bags to kind of keep the flies out and stuff, but basically, and this is basically what you would see would be a typical house where migrant workers live. As I mentioned before, and as you see here as a testament, regardless of the hardships, Our Lady of Guadalupe never left their side. That was the guiding light. That was the thing that held them together when everything was lost. Vamos a rezar a la Virgen. Very important part of the story, very important part. If it wasn't for the railroad tracks, trains, and the Virgen de Guadalupe, it would have been very difficult. Those were the kind of the guiding forces that helped them to come to the United States. Okay, let's go to 1900s. Now we're in Aurora. Just wanted to kind of give you a brief summary of who were some of the first people. I'll get into the first community, but these are some of the first people. The very, very first documentation of somebody supposedly from Mexico is a gentleman by the name of Samuel Wallace from Mexico. Give me a break. No, 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 all joking aside, yeah. That doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me because it's as early as oh Mexican-American War. Yes, Mexican-American War. There were there were immigrants from Ireland who came and fought with Mexico. They had a San Patricios battalion, St. Patrick's battalion. So these were Irish immigrants who came, and the reason you say, well, what are Irish immigrants doing helping Mexicans? You know, well, they're traveling to Mexico. They were Catholic. That's simple. They're Catholic. In the discussion. But that's why they traveled to Mexico. So this was Samuel Wallace. He was the very first man to be here. I do believe he is listed as Mexican. Yes, Samuel Wallace, a real good friend of mine. He's now back in El Paso. His name was Modesto Beckett. Beckett, his dad was, his grandfather was railroad worker, but they lived in El Paso. But so, yeah, I do believe that he was Mexican, and I believe he was Mexican-Irish. Or he might have just been Irish, but I'm not sure. He was Irish. But anyway. The second one was really interesting because I stumbled across Garfield Martinez doing some different search. But he has a Hispanic last name, Martinez. So I'm going to claim him. He was a 28-year-old African-American who was born in Illinois. I found him in the 1910 census of African-Americans in Aurora. And he was only listed as a brother-in-law, and he was what they call the iron polisher. So he must have worked at a foundry or something. So those were the first two that happened to be, well, as I look at it, an Irishman and an African-American. Not bad. The next one is, and I'll get to him in a minute. I found him in the 1920 census. It's 1909, Antonio, the 40 single male. And there was another one, Luis Scova. That last surname, I don't recognize it. I check it out, and it appears to be Italian. And I thought, well, and it was pointed out that the word escoba in Italy, in Italian, also means broom, and in Spanish, as you well know, is broom. So I said, well, you know, either he could have been an Italian, possibility. They were also in Mexico, or maybe his name was Escola, and they just do it. So there was a lot of errors in the census, human errors. Then let's move real quickly. By 1920, that is when you see the population start to develop. I'll go over the census in my book, and I don't have time to cover this in this type, but in the one book called The First Mexican Community, I have the complete census from 1920 to 1940 of all the people from Mexico, or at least from Mexican or Spanish surnames in the index. I've taken a couple out just to kind of share with you. But anyway, these numbers, that's where they came from. So in 1920, the population of people from Mexico, at least with Spanish last names, which they would have all been from Mexico, there was only 22. By 1930, the population had jumped to 458. Big. And there were a lot of things going on at the time. So that's when you saw the big spike. However, 10 years later, 1940, the population dropped to 227. It was a drop of 231 people, over 50%. And you say, well, why did so many people leave? Well, two main factors, and they're covered in my book. I don't have really time to cover that. But the main one, the first one was the Great Depression. Hey, everybody's losing their jobs. You know, people are looking around, say, hey, wait a minute here. I'm an American and I got this Mexican guy here taking my job. So you know how that goes. You still see that here. They're taking our jobs. So the Great Depression forced many employers, including Manuel, because he didn't have his papers. He lost his job, but he was able to find a job with the WPA, I think it was called. It was the works program, a works program. So he was able to get a job digging Mastodon Lake. Also, the Vera family, the patriarch, Eladio, from the Vera family. He also, during that time, I think there's a picture of him. He also found work at the WPA, working at the Mastodon Lake. So they were resourceful. One way or another, they're going to take care of their family. So this kind of gives you a snapshot of what Aurora looked like. It started out with just a few people coming in, and then 1920 it begins to, and then 1930 was the big push. Real quickly, this is the 1920 census. I'll just go over to real briefly. Again, this is all in the book. Just a summary. There was a total of 22 people. There was 2 married females, 2 married males, 18 singles. Predominantly, the immigrants were single men, either single, not married, or they left their families at home. There were 13 railroad workers, so you know that over half of them were railroad workers, and they lived right across the street from the old former Boxcar, I'm sorry, the CB&Q complex. The old roundhouse is still there. You see the address, 160 Broadway. That's where that is. So there was 2 places where they tended to live, either on 160, and that is just one place. 2, 4, 6, 8, 12 people there, or something like that, 11. So I came to the conclusion that that had to be a boarding house. There were a lot of boarding houses along that way. The Romanians, when they first came, that's where they lived. Then as the Mexicans came in and the Romanians began to move up in social mobility, then they began to move to Pigeon Hill. So you see that movement. So as the Romanians left, Hungarians, Czechs, then the Mexicans moved in. So there was the 160 Broadway right across from the CB&Q complex, and also in the yellow you see bunk cars. That, my friends, is the first Mexican boxcar camp in Aurora. It had been oral history about that, but nobody said, oh yeah, it's here, it's here. I knew where it was, but it was all word of mouth. All, well, so-and-so told me, and so. Well, my middle name should have been, was it Thomas? Is that Doubting Thomas? It showed me, right, Valerie? You have to show me. Excuse me. But here it is. What it shows is that they have bunk cars. That means those are the boxcar camps where they live, not the camp. That is, I'll show you that in a minute. But that makes that using the U.S. Census, the Aurora Census, that is basically where the very first Mexican boxcar camp was. It's right as you go over the High Street Bridge. It'd be on the same side as Pigeon Hill, and that'd be the north side. So that basically is where the first people from Mexico lived. So either most of them worked at the railroad, or they worked at the foundry. They had a woman who was a lodge keeper, and then several unemployed people. That's a snapshot of. So when Olivia came in around 1924, this kind of gives you an idea of what Aurora was looking like. 1923 is when the CB&Q set up the West Eola Boxcar Camp in Aurora Township, just on the outskirts of Aurora, right? If you know where Austin Western is, Dearborn Farm, Dearborn, Indian Avenue, that whole area. That's where that's where the boxcar camp was. The reason they put it there is they also established a metal reclamation plant. They had gone through a big railroad strike in 1922, and they reorganized. And part of that, they brought the metal reclamation on site. So their logic is, hey, we need we need loyal, dependable people who live on site. So if there's any emergencies, we're right there. We don't have to get them in town. That is the genesis of the Mexican boxcar camp. They thought, well,
The north side or the south side?
the Mexican boxcar camp?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been on the east side, all the way in Aurora Township, past Farnsworth Avenue. I'll show you a map of that. I'll show you a map of that. So this is their arrival, and obviously this is not a picture, this is an AI image that I generated based on several drawings and a photo. This is what it would have looked like. Again, this is not an actual photograph IA generated, but it gives you a pretty good idea of what it would look like. I do know that their chapel was in the center. Well, shortly after 1923, when they set up the Mexican boxcar camp, another violent war was going on in Mexico. It was called the Cristero Rebellion, and the Cristero Rebellion basically was the Mexican government enforcement of anti-cleric laws. They could only have so many priests per area. They couldn't wear their garb certain times. Very, very restrictive. They took their land away. They took their power away. They couldn't, the Catholic Church was taken out of the school. So what happened is that then the people who were loyal to the Catholic Church, called Cristeros, they rebelled, and that is when you have the Cristero Rebellion, 1926. The reason I have to bring that up is that though the Mexican Revolution was responsible for about 1 million people, thereabouts, coming to the United States, the Cristero War was responsible for about 250,000 people leaving. So those were two factors that came up. I know in talking to Jesse, my friend Jesse Vera, back there, he tells the story that his grandfather Hilario, he came up to the United States and had lived there for quite a few years. But then the Cristero War came about, and their father, Jesse Jr., would have been Jesse Jr., she was afraid, mom was afraid that they were going to come and kidnap him, or they were going to somehow take him into the military, which they often did. So that was the catalyst for the Vera family, the whole family coming up. But Hilario was already here in the United States. But he feared for Jesse's dad B, so that's why they came up. It was a very, very difficult time for Catholics. Priests that did not obey or openly defied the order, they were easily taken care of. Just put them in a firing squad. Yeah, ya se acabó. Or if you're a Cristero, they just shot them. And often what they did, as you see on the right, after they'd been shot, they would hang them on a telephone pole. I'm sorry, not telephone. They didn't have telephone, but telegraph poles. And that's where they left them to hang as a warning for other Cristeros. That was the situation in Mexico at the time, which really prompted more people from Mexico to leave. Again, as I mentioned, there was an estimated 250,000 people that fled any way that they possibly could during the Cristero, either with my donkey and I'll just cross the Rio Grande, or this one here in Michoacan, get on the train, get my luggage, and we have to leave here. We have to go somewhere where it's safe. Fast forward to 1923. This is a drawing that was done by Ralph Cruz. I met him several times. He's an uncle of a good friend of mine. They lived on Calhoun. His parents they lived in the boxcar camp. He was the one that I told you was involved in blowing up the trains. But this was his son, Ralph. He became an electrical engineer. Anyway, many years later, he drew this map, and what this map shows is, let me go through it real quick. The little red dot is the Mexican boxcar camp. The little blue dot all the way on the upper right is the scrapyard and the machine shop. You can see that well, you probably can't see it very well. They would gather all the scrap. They had big cranes, electromagnetic cranes that would move the scrap into cars. Then they would take it. The reason they wanted to do that is because they could save a lot of money. Hi, Peter. Good friend of mine. As part of their reorganization, they had built the Aurora complex, the Aurora, and in the Aurora CB&Q complex, they had their own foundry. They had the blacksmith shop. They did everything: upholstery, wood shop. They made boxcars. They made engines. They did everything. So what they did in order to save money was smart. They would break down all the scrap, take it from here, 3 miles up the road, then drop it off at the foundry on South Broadway. They would melt it down, and then they would make new parts. So that was the scrapyard. The purple one, that was the Austin Western complex there. At the time, it was called the Western Wheeled Scraper Company. It changed its name 1934, the same time that the Mexican boxcar camp closed. For any of you who grew up in Aurora and in that neighborhood, like my cousin Hector and I, the one orange one, that's Oak Park School, our alma mater. And then you see in the yellow, that's St. Therese School. Some of you may be familiar with that. So that was basically the community. There was another community, but this was the Mexican boxcar community. This is where it is, as your question, Patrick, where it was. If you go on the outskirts of Aurora, right off of Farnsworth, just about maybe a mile or so from the Austin Western, this is looking east. These are the tracks that go from Aurora to Chicago. The little red dots, this is where the boxcar camp would have been. As when I came to Aurora in 1950, I lived about a quarter, maybe half a mile from here. So we used to play all along the side on the left, on the right, there's a creek there, Indian Creek. So I was familiar with it, but by that time, the boxcar camp was gone. This is a scale model, a module that I built. That is the one that is on the exhibit. When you go out and see in the atrium, that is the exhibit. And basically there's two parts of it. The one in the foreground, that is the scrapyard. That does not look exactly like the scrapyard that you saw on Ralph's, but it was just impossible for me to try to recreate that, mainly because of the types of cranes that they had. But as you can see here, they would bring in the scraps. Men on all the sides, they would just systematically, like ants, they would just disassemble the trains, all the locomotives, and eventually get them into scraps. And as you can see there, you can see one train now with maybe 4 gondolas pulling out. That is where they worked. And in the background of the other, that is the Mexican boxcar camp. Again, you can see that at the exhibition. So this is where they lived, this is where they worshiped, and this is where they worked. This was the first Mexican community in Aurora, Illinois, and I'll explain why. Well, I'll explain now. The reason that is for a place to be a community, it has to meet certain criteria. It has to be in a specific geographical location. There it is. The ones in Aurora, there were some in Pigeon Hill, some on Indian Avenue, some here and there, but there was no one geographic that you can say this is where it was. So it meets that criteria. The other criteria is that it has to have an institution. The Mexican people in Aurora did not have an institution. And what do I mean by an institution? Well, it could have been a social club. That's an institution. It could have also been a church. That's an institution. The people that lived in Aurora, they either, like Gloria, and the Vera clan, they went to St. Joe's. Some of the other ones, maybe the Moraleses, they probably went to St. Teresa's. There might probably some that went to St. Nick's. Those are basically the three churches that were basically where the parishioners were Mexican, were from Mexico. But that's basically what it looked like. I was compelled to do something like this because you can say Mexican boxcar all you want, but until you see something, a 3D something, they say, oh, it's like a gestalt. You have to see the whole thing. Once you see the whole thing, then you say, oh, now I understand the different pieces. But if you see the whole, you get that whole, then at that point that you can say, now I understand. This is a closer view. I've already talked about it. In the yellow, that is the chapel. This is where I used this drawing to replicate the modules. And as it shows there, the chapel was in the orange. The boxcars were, I'm sorry, the yellow is the chapel, and the two red dots, those are the Mexican boxcar camps. In between those, it looks like a little dots, look like little soldiers, those are the outhouses. So those were basically those, that's what it looked like. Over to the left, upper left in purple, that was a baseball field that the men built for their children. And then you see the roundhouse. This is what the boxcar camp looked like from 1923 to 1934. This is really the only one that I'm aware of that you can see the entire thing, the entire boxcar camp. I'm going to say that this had to be taken before 1927 because they didn't build a chapel until 1927. And I don't see a chapel here. So that's kind of what I'm thinking is when it took. I'm not going to go over this. This is in the book. This is one, I got this from my very good friend Manny Nila, who was born in the boxcar camp. And no, I'm sorry, I got this from Ralph Cruz. This is his record, who he remembered lived at the boxcar camp. Again, all this information is in the book, so I'm not going to spend any more time. The only thing I did want to point out toward the bottom, boxcar number 18 is where Manuel lived and his wife and Ben and Julia at that time. Morales, are they in here? No, I've seen them, some casinos are in there here. So anyway, this is a photograph that I've seen this floating around, but I got this from the Padilla family. And basically, I like it because it looks old. I think it's an original. And what they have all the way in the front, in the red, that would have been Pete, middle boy, or the youngest. And then Ralph Cruz, who do the map, that's yellow, no relation. And then Daniel, he was a server, I guess a server. What is that, Jerry? A server at the church, like a altar boy? Altar, okay.
Acolyte.
What's that?
Acolyte.
Acolyte, well. I never got selected. Anyway, just joking. So there's Daniel and then there's Wally. So that to me was very symbolic because now I had discovered Ralph through his daughter. But then to find the other boys, it's just very meaningful because it's just very meaningful. So this gives you an idea of where they worshiped. This is the inside of the chapel that the men built. They were given the scrap metal and the scrap wood and everything, and they built their own chapel. If you look at when you look at the one image on the right, that little purple dot, that is the altar. Behind the altar in that dot is the picture that you see, or the lithograph on the right. That is the original lithograph that came from the chapel, which to me is, I'm even afraid to touch it because, it's a significance. I get choked up on it. But that image right there came from Boxcar Camp, part of history. And thank you again for sharing that. What was the scrap yard look like? Well, There's now obviously not a picture, but this is what would have looked like. They bring them in and they tear them down, and that's what they did. Rain, shine, snow, it didn't make any difference. That's what they did to support their family. On the right, that is the plant and the machine shop. The Padilla family recognized their grandfather. You see him there with a little red dot. That is Manuel. That is dated 1930, I believe, or 1931. If you look to the lower right, just kind of looking, you can't always go by looks like it looks like those people, that must have been the Mexican workers. They're kind of by themselves, but they kind of look, I hate to stereotype, but it doesn't surprise me. The men in the back, they all have little white shirts. So those were the European immigrants. So you could see the social class in the back. No, white shirt, a little vest, and as you go down, it's lower, then you see the workers. This is the Padilla family. You have in the back Manuel, the little red dot. They have another individual who's unidentified. How about that? I'm sorry, thank you. That's the Perez family, thank you. So you have Manuel, you have another individual unrecognized, and you have Julia.
That's Ben. It's the oldest son.
That is Ben.
That's Ben.
Ben
That's
Igno.
Uncle Ben.
Name is. Ben Igno his name was.
You're right, because he's missing. Okay. Okay. See, I learned something. Good, thank you. That's why they're here, to help me with this. So, good. So that is the family, the boys, the mother and father. That's what the story is about. Father Valadez, Alberto Valadez, the reason I talked about these Cristero rebellion is that Father Valadez was dispatched out of Mexico during the Cristero rebellion because a good possibility that he would have been shot or killed. So he came up. His aunt was Julia's mom, and I'm not sure if they lived together, where he lived with them, but he was the chaplain at the St. Charles Hospital. So that is the Perez family. Here is the story that made this possible. Not too long, about a year ago, I see it. About a year ago, I came up and visited with Colleen, and she asked me, yeah, I'm gonna have to go a little longer. Yeah. So this is what she showed me, and she says, do you know what this is? I said, yeah, I do. It's the only thing I knew, that it was in front of the Boxcar camp, or the chapel, and I knew that the person in the middle, that was Father Valadez, but that's all I knew. It was just kind of process of elimination. But then when I did Olivia last year here, I had the honor to meet the Padilla family, and they came up to me and said, that's our mom. So to me, that was a big discovery. So this is what the story was about. So when I told Colleen, yes, I do know, I didn't know the whole story, but then that prompted me to really pursue it. And eventually, that's how I eventually was able to get the story. So this is what our story is about here. Moving quickly, the other part of the Padilla family, equally important, the father. Salvador Alonso Padilla. He was baptized in 1923 in, oops, I didn't fix the whole thing, in Aguascalientes, not too far, about 65 miles from where the Perez family was. And so you have his birth certificate and then the instructions. I wanted to put that in there because they're a lot different than what you see them now. You can see all the religious artifacts on it. And in Spanish, you can, see the significance of being baptized, the instructions. These are very, very part of you have to be baptized. If you're not, that's no discussion, but that's what the paperwork looked like. I'm not going backwards, no. Anyway, you've seen this one. This is an image again of the mandolin that is there. On the right, you see that is Julia. Probably, maybe it had to be because they left in they left the Boxcar camp around 1921. So I don't think she could have been maybe 16, 17 at that most. But anyway, that's Julia and her friend Mali Redas. I'll introduce you to her a little bit later. She shows up. So that's the key figure, Julia. And then on the right, I also need to bring out, have you guys seen this, Padilla family? Have you seen this picture
It's the
before?
basement of St. Joe's Church.
That's correct.
The white camp is in the back there.
That's correct. That's
The pastor back there.
That's correct. That is correct. The basement of St. Joseph's Hospital, I'm sorry, St. Joseph's Church.
The old church.
Yeah, that priest, he's been around forever. Everybody knew him, Father Joe. My educated guess is that this was the festival of our feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. The reason I say that is they're wearing their coats. And you look at all those people, why else would they be there? Well, they could have been there, but that's a very big gathering. And there was, and I'll talk a little bit later, there was the people at the Boxcar camp did establish a social organization. This is the other institution. The one was the church. That is an institution. The other institution was the religious social organization called the Guadalupana Society. Very, very part of the culture. And for the most part, it was the woman's role in the society and in culture that they are the ones responsible for taking care of the children and responsible for making sure that they are brought up in a Catholic faith. The father was just, I'll bring them, I'm the breadwinner and, yo mando, I'm my boss, but in reality, it was a woman who bossed. So that's just the way it was. But again, I thought this was very important because this symbolizes the faith and the resilience that in spite of where they lived, in spite of the condition, in spite of everything, here they are. What are they doing there? Worshiping, kept them together. Very, very important aspect of it. I'm going to briefly go over this because time is running out. But in the book, you're going to see to the left, I was also very fortunate to come across, thanks to the Padilla family, 5 pages of notes that Julia had run on the left, that these are the records of the people that were in the Guadalupana Society. That was to me just a goal because it's in her handwritings. They tell me where she writes. You see it's interesting the way she writes because the one you see numbers, it could be English or Spanish, I can't read it, but it says nombres. And then all the way on the, oh no, I thought it said car, but it says carro. So that would have been the boxcar. So she lists, enumerates them, their name and the boxcar camp, the boxcar number that they lived in. Well, that's okay. It's a list, but again, I'm a doubting Thomas. I need to verify it. How do I verify it? I mean, how do I know this is not just something somebody put together? Well, what do? A good researcher, then I go to the census, and sure enough. So I'll just go through these. I'm just going to use this as an example. So as you see, the purple ones, sure enough, those are the Hernandez families. They were related to the Nilas. That was the brother-in-law. So yeah, I find them there. And then I look, and sure enough, I also find them on the census. You see that in the address, it's Retchinger Road. Retchinger Road was the McClure Road. Now it's McClure Road, but that's what it was before. So I knew anybody on Retchinger Road, that's the boxcar camp. So I'm going to go through these. Here's some more people, but these are all in the book. Again, all I did was basically cross-validate. Take a list, they're on Julia's list, but are they on the census? And sure enough, everything she wrote, so I can assure you that her list is valid. It is accurate. It is accurate. What I also did find out from families is, well, family, there are some that joined the society, and there are others that didn't join. It's like Mexican husband, like my dad. I'm not going to go to church because all they want is my money. So, but it was the women that tended to go and to bring the family. The father, well, may or may not go. It all depends. But again, I can verify that what you will find in her list does match up. Again, here's more. Right here, I'm going to take a moment. The Frostos are in there. Mary Ann is here. She married Ruben, Jesus' oldest son. And so when they came from Mexico, then they went to Canton, Illinois. He worked in a coal mine, I believe. It's a coal mine. And then from there, they came to Aurora, where we started working at the Boxcar camp. I believe he was in Boxcar number 12. So sure enough, there's Jesus, Esther, Ruben, Esther, and Ricardo. They're all there. So they all belong. Yeah, they all belonged. Did they all belong? Yeah. They all belong to the same family, and they belong to the society. This is Salvador. Again, you met him. He was born in 1923. You look at the map, the little red dot is where he was born, in Aguascalientes. The little blue dot, just a little bit above that, that is where the Perez family came from. One of the processes that they went through, let me back up a little bit. At the same time, what facilitated Salvador's coming to the United States was the Bracero program. And the Bracero program was an agreement between Mexico and the United States that the United States was during World War II. It also happened during World War I, but during World War II, there was a severe lack of manpower. I hate to use the word manpower, but that's what it is, in males, because as you well know, at that time, all the good paying factory jobs were males. So when the war came, they got drafted. So that left an opportunity for females to now start working now in jobs that were previously held by men. I'm not sure if they paid them the same as men, but at least they were doing the same types of jobs. From what I understand, probably around during the war, Julia worked at the Boxcar camp at the reclamation. She was a forklift driver. Right, that's what yeah. And they talk about doing races. We used to race them, right? Yeah. So Julia was a worker. I also saw her in one census as she worked at the St. Charles Hospital. I met Julia many years ago when I started teaching at the West High at the bilingual program. Same time I met my good friend Mary Ann. Julia was a teacher aide there. So Julia did a lot of things to help support her family. That's how I met these ladies, but never in my wildest dreams did I think that all these years later, here we are having this conversation. I wanted to bring this up because it was during this period that I surmised, there is no record that shows it, but there is kind of a record, and I'll go into it in a minute, is that Salvador came up here through the Bracero program. And again, this was an agreement between the two governments for temporary workers. They would come, and basically the jobs that they targeted were agriculture, construction, and railroads. That's where, when the men got drafted, boom. So they brought braceros as temporary workers. I have to show these pictures because they all went through the process. You come to the border, they process you. And in quite a few of the border stops, the men were actually fumigated. They were stripped, dehumidating process. They were fumigated. Mexicans at that time, and even today, I suspect some people, they were perceived as dirty and full of diseases, and they carried typhoid. So we have to get them clean. We have to fumigate. We have to fumigate the Mexican people. They're dirty. So then Salvador, how did he get here? Well, you see the little blue dots that he's coming from Aguascalientes to the railroad. This is the importance of the railroad. If you were near the railroad, basically got to where the main tracks were. So you see the blue gets them to the main National Mexican Railroad, takes them all the way to Nuevo Laredo, and then from Nuevo Laredo, then the green makes his way to Aurora. And when he arrived, he was hired by the CB&Q, and he started, when he got to Aurora, one of Julia's jobs was to greet the people, the braceros coming from Mexico, because she spoke Spanish. So, hey, bilingual services were really in need at that time. I'm not sure she got bilingual pay. She just worked for them, so hey, you greet them. Well, they met, and it must have been, love at first sight, and, within a short period of time, then they got married. And you can see their official record, and then their holy matrimony. And guess who married them? Yes, Father, he's everywhere. Here's their marriage picture. You see all the way on the right, on the left, you see Pete, and you see Ben, you see Salvador, dashing young man. He became a tailor later, and he tailored my first suit. And I still remember, handsome guy, hair all slick, had a, ¿cómo se llama? Tape measure, little pencil. Little did I know, I was about 7. Little did I know that I'd be talking about him. I had no clue. I knew Sal, he doesn't remember me, but when we were Waldo, 7th and 8th grade.
I wasn't at Waldo. I went to grade school.
Oh, East High, then it must have been East High. Yeah, the reason I knew him is that I thought he was Italian at first. When you look at him, if he had that hair, you looked Italian, I said. But the reason I know everybody knew him because he had a really rock and roll band. What was the name of the band?
420.
I don't know what it was. They changed a lot of names over.
Yeah. So anyway, that just a little bit of
Flintstones.
what's that?
We were the Flintstones. Talk about rock and roll. Huh?
Yeah. So we go back to the. So this is the family, all the way on the right, you see Winifred. Hope so.
Yeah.
Okay, you see Pete's wife, I think her name was Marie.
He wasn't married then.
No, that,
No, that was my Uncle Wally's wife.
Uncle Wally's
Ruth.
wife.
Ruth. And the one in the end was Winnie, as Ben.
Okay, I have to get that, I have to,
Yeah.
no, okay. Teacher stands corrected.
The little,
Little girl was
it's Margie. That's
that's
Ben's
Ben.
daughter.
Ben's daughter.
Okay. Oh,
They're
I
all
have,
gone now except for Margie.
from Margie, I have to update this. This is the family. It was interesting, because eventually they lived at, I think, 208 Rural Street. It's a small house, and I don't know how they got 12 or 13 people in there. Anyway.
We're Mexican.
Okay, try to move this quick here. How did he get here? Well, to be able to come here, you had to have some type of a sponsor. To be a bracero, you had to have some type of employment. Okay, well, this is interesting. The first of documentation, 1945, from the old station, those of you in WMRO, alive from Aurora. Okay, and basically this is certified that I will provide employment. This is what they needed to get to the United States. Proof that you have a job, and that he has a job, and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, that's the first documentation. Then, I'm not sure all what happened, but this is a second part of the documentation. The reason you're seeing this letter is that Salvador realized, and Julia, they were not American citizens. So to become American citizens, there's a process that you gotta go through. Gotta go back, you gotta get letters of references, et cetera, et cetera. But this documents that Salvador was a bracero, he was recruited to the CB&Q by the CB&Q, and he came. That's how he got here. That's a really important a distinction. I'm not sure how long he worked there, but it also says that he crossed at El Paso. That was where he crossed. So that was this one. So apparently he went back after he got married to try to get his citizenship. So basically it just shows he got a provisional pass. And now you're being legal. And on the right is significant because that is what's called an alien head tax. And at that time, anytime that somebody crossed from Mexico, it was $8. Doesn't seem like much, but at that time, $8 was a lot of money. That's a lot of money. So basically, it documents that in 1946, the Salvador did cross at Laredo, and they got him as race. And at that time, it was either black or Asian or etc. They didn't delineate Hispanics. So anyway, that documents how he got here. This is some more of his documentation from Mexico, basically certifying that this is who he was born with, these are his parents, etc., etc. Then on the right, you actually see his passport. That's what really brought him, that enabled him. The reason I brought this is the process that people had to go through. You may sneak in, okay, but if you're going to stay, if you want to become American citizens, this is what you got to do. This is part of the journey. This is part of just doing what you have to be able to stay in the United States. This is an interesting that on the left, that was the actual little, ¿cómo se llama? Sometimes I flip to Spanish, a little folder where you put your affidavit. This was a lawyer by the name of Lester James Gavin, an attorney there at 14 South Fox Street, which is Downer Place now, where I believe. But anyway, so that's what then Salvador would do is he go to an attorney, they would do an affidavit, and then they would then begin processing for his citizenship. In 1948, Julia became a U.S. citizen. This kind of shows you. Her mom did too, but I didn't put her picture, but her mom also was a citizen. Mom and dad, I must say the first time I saw grandma there, I first looked at her, I'm not sure if I want to deal with her, but I understand. But I understand she was just, what's that?
The firecrackers.
A firecracker, yeah. Yeah,
She don't put up with too much, believe me.
what's that?
She don't put up with too much.
No, I look at her and who would I want not meet in a dark corner? I deal with Manuel, but don't deal with a lady. No. I have scars to prove that. Okay, but this is the matriarch and the patriarch of the family. This is the people that had made so much sacrifices for them to be here, both on the Perez and the Padilla. Right here, I'm not even going to start to name them all. You can ask them, but this is the entire family there. Sal, now look, he's all the way on the right top. Now tell me he doesn't look like Italian. Yeah. Julie, you're all the way to the left top, and then we can talk a little bit later about, but this is the Padilla family. This the matriarch, patriarch, and this is what this story is about. This is the people.
I share him.
What's that?
My wife on her.
Okay. Real quickly, this is where the first Mexican boxcar camp was. The little blue dot is where the Mexican boxcar camp was, right off of High Street. You should be able to see it on the right. The rectangular blue dot is where the former CB&Q complex was, the roundhouse, etc. The red dot, the biggest, that was 160 Broadway. This is where the majority of the Mexicans that were in Aurora of the 20, that's where they lived. The other two are just other. Okay, I'm not going to go into this because this is in the book, but what I did is in the index, you will find there's probably about 20 pages of that 1920, 1930, and the 1940 census. This is the complete list of all the people. I'm not going to say from Mexico because they might have come from the United States, living in the States. but these are all the people of Mexican ancestry who lived in Aurora 1920, 1930, and 1940. They're in the book. You can go down one by one. Who was the head? Who was the wife? Who was the children? How old were they? Where you see the T, that's in the answer, that's toddlers. So this is, if you're interested, did my family, where did they live? Were they in the Boxcar or not? The book has it. I wish I could do it, but it's just a lot of information. I'm gonna go through these real quick. It just shows basically this one right here, and this is 1930. This is when you see all, 458. And I'd cross-referenced them. These are this is the Nila family, the Fausto, the Cancinos, the Vargas, and the Torres. Obviously, I can't do all because then you'd really get confused. But again, these are all in the appendix. 1930 is when you see the biggest population. There was a big shift. The biggest amount you see all the way on the middle left, that's Pigeon Hill there. You can see a concentration there. That's at that time where they probably was the biggest concentration. The little purple box there, rectangular, that's where the Mexican boxcar camp. You look right below that, that would have been right around St. Nicholas Church. Those little dots there on the to the left, lower left. So that is the St. Nick's. Above that, to the north, that is Pigeon Hill. Then to the right, that is Dearborn Avenue. It's starting to build up. And then all the blue little boxes, rectangles, that is the Mexican boxcar camp. So the majority of the population either lived around Dearborn or the Mexican boxcar camp. Again, all that data is in the book. Again, I'm not going to go over these that because it just takes up too much time. All that information is in the book, so it's loaded. Lastly, my last comment before I close up, I just wanted to invite you all to, I'm a co-curator of a big exhibition. It's a great honor for me because it's being held at the National Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago. And it's going to go from November the 21st until mid-April. The name of it is Rieles y Raíces, rails and roots. And basically, this what you see here, things that I've developed, plus the boxcar camp, that's a small portion of it. The one at this museum is going to be much bigger than that. We have the whole gallery. So you will see the complete story, but that one focuses on the Midwest. But being a co-curator, we have a section of the Aurora, a nice subsection. So again, you can check out their website. If you've never been to the Mexican Museum of Art, I highly recommend it. There's some beautiful stuff. And it certainly is an honor. It's free admission. But again, you can just check out their website and highly encourage you to attend. That is my presentation. I'm a little bit over time, but as I told Olivia, I don't think that the people will be bored, and hope you weren't, because there's just a lot of data. I can't begin to start. Well, they came here in Aurora, they lived at Boxcar camp, and they had a family, and they lived happily ever after. No. To get an appreciation, you really need to understand what Mexico was like, what forced them to leave. The struggle that they had to go through, and how did they finally end up in Aurora, and what was it that kept them together? How did they do it? And here they are, and I want to say here they are because in the last chapter of the book, it's called, also, I have a section, chapter 7, 8 chapters. Chapter 7, some of you like it because it looks like a yearbook. I was curious to find out who was the first Hispanic to graduate from East or West. Just as a researcher, I ask these little stupid questions, right, Jerry? A little sin. Well, how the hell am I going to find that? Yearbooks. So I came here, genealogy department, and I asked, I'm looking for the yearbooks. Yeah, we got them. Good. And then said to me, do you want the yearbooks or you want the CD? I said, CD? What do you mean CD? Yeah, we have them all all from 1920 up until, I'm not sure when. We have all the CDs. Hey, give me the CDs. So I literally went through all the CDs, found the very first one in, I think, 1932, Hipólito Horta. Horta, you know the Hortas.
Yes.
It's in the book. So I have in the book also the section in chapter 7, all the people, they're all Mexican at this point. I want to say Hispanics, but to be clear, they were all Mexicans. No Mexican, the Mexican Americans had not gotten to Aurora yet, not until around late 1940s, 1950s when Hector came, our family was here. So all there, so chapter 7 has all the pictures, those of you who would like to see yearbooks, have all the pictures of the first graduates and all the classes, all the homeroom classes that they used to call them. There must be about maybe close to maybe 15, 16, 17 pages. This goes from 1923 to 1960. These are the individuals who are second and third generation Mexicans that lived here. So it gives you a good idea of all the people from Mexico or Mexico who were the first to be here. That being said, that's my presentation. Yeah.
So let's take questions for about 10 minutes. And so anybody go ahead and shout it out and I'll repeat it if needed.
Questions? I have a question if you want to start. I'll let you. Any questions? Now, I know I'm a damn good teacher, but I couldn't be that good.
Record of how the children were educated.
How were the children educated?
Well, there's, yes. Probably the majority of them, the majority from the best I can recollect that I found is that the majority of them would have been educated in one of the parochial schools, St. Joe's, St. Nick's, or St. Therese. Now, as far as the education, the woman was the main one that kind of stayed after that, just like the same in religion. Now, there was another group like the Cruz family. I'm not sure about the Morales, but I know that the Cruz and the Barajas family, they all went to Oak Parks. They went to public schools. So it was a variety of public schools, but I would tend to say that most of them went to a Catholic parochial school for their education. Another question. Jerry, my good friend Jerry Lubashane.
They add something about the San Patricios in the Mexican War.
Say that again.
Most of you know that there was the Irish potato famine in 1846 years. Many Irish came to the United States, and as soon as they got here, they found out the Mexican War was going on, so they formed the Irish Brigade.
Yes,
And they joined the United States Army.
yes.
So when they got to Matamoros on the border, they could see across the river that the Mexican armies were going to mass and receiving communion. And they were Catholics, so they crossed the river and became the San Patricios. They were the St. Patrick's Brigade,
I see.
and they became the San Patricios and fought along with the Mexicans.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate, I didn't know that aspect, but I have a question to ask then. As I mentioned, it was the mother's role, the woman's role, the mother in this case, to make sure that the children followed the Catholic doctrine, if you will. Dear family, I know you mentioned this to me. Could you share with the audience the ritual that your mother had every night in terms of praying? And you had a little altar at the house, didn't you?
My grandmother.
Yeah.
My
Okay, yeah, hang on. Could you explain how your grandmother how she maintained the Catholic Church of what she instilled that then we came down to.
Yeah, she had an altar in her home, and we would pray every day, every night at the rosary.
Would you get on your knees?
Yes, absolutely. I have fond memories of my grandpa
Oh,
kneeling with his work weary hands with his rosary, kneeling in front of the Blessed Virgin. And that was a given. If you were in the house and we were praying, you had to pray the rosary, and they did every day. And we were brought up with that.
very emotional in a very aspect. But that's, you needed to hear that from them. That, would you say that's what really kept the family together, that regardless of what everything was happening, you could always rely on the Vatican and always rely on prayer to get you there? Yeah. Questions? Let me ask you, as growing up, did you find any discrimination in your neighborhood? No?
I don't know.
No, nothing outright.
No. No.
Nothing outright, just nothing outright, you know. Hey, everything makes me this.
Say that again. I don't think I heard you.
It wasn't outright, it just, you could sense people when they were trying to avoid you or, you know, just not giving you real respect, but they didn't come out and out, come out there with torches and pictures. But you could tell people,
Yeah.
it wasn't outright, but there's some people that just,
Oh, I do
they're
have
flat
to say,
out prejudice, a lot of them were, you know.
if I remember right, when my grandparents, Eulalia and Manuel, were looking for a house,
Mhm.
and they found the one on Rural Street. And they wanted to buy the house, and there was some, people that signed a petition to keep them out of the neighborhood, because they didn't want Mexicans in that neighborhood. And Father Whitey Camp spearheaded a campaign to help them be allowed to buy their house on Rural Street.
So it was
So
father,
there-
father.
So my grandparents, yeah, they had to, there was dissension, you know, because at that time, at Pigeon Hill, they didn't want Mexicans in that neighborhood. And so blessings on Father Whitey Camp, he spearheaded a campaign, and they were finally allowed to purchase that home, which we've had for many, many years.
Mhm.
So there was some dissension back then. I
Yes.
think for us kids growing up, it wasn't as bad, but when my grandparents first came to this country, there was a lot of that.
Mhm.
And, most people are our heroes.
Yes.
Come to this country that they don't know the language, they're not educated, to come here young with family, not knowing where they're gonna live, what they're gonna do, and to carve out a life for their
Yes.
families. And
Yes.
here we are, thanks to them.
Yes, thank you. And that is their story. And all fair, what I also have to say is that what the people from Mexico endured, the same thing that the Romanians endured when they got here. You know, the Luxembourgers, my story, the oral, is that the Luxembourgers were living, they wouldn't sell them houses. Now, I'm not gonna sell them to Romanians. So that's the way they were treated. They don't speak English. They're the very, very same thing.
Yep.
Low life, they blah, 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 blah. They could, the same thing. There was one quick, can't remember where I read some research, but some Romanians were complaining that they went to St. Nick's, and all the instructions were in German. Say, hey, if you don't speak German, tough luck. Also, the Romanians would complain that all the good bank jobs in Aurora, that if you didn't speak German, you ain't gonna get a job. So you had to speak English and German. So yeah, there was all that. Luxembourgers against the Romanians against this, and in fact, Pigeon Hill, and I'll turn you over. They call it Pigeon Hill. Well, as you probably know, Aurora was very ethnically divided. They had an African American community, one around Galena, not, Grand Boulevard, some along the river, small little places. There was a, it was in Dutchtown around Union and North Avenue, where the worst kitchen is, that was in one. Little Italy was around where Sard, Street is, or whatever that is. What's that?
Italian American.
Italian American Club is right there. And Pigeon Hill, for the longest time, I thought it was just Pigeon Hill. Then I heard somebody, somebody told me who lived there, and then I read it later, that was commonly referred to as Hunky Hill. For the Hungarians, even though the majority of the people were Romanians, but
Well, they lumped them together.
they lumped them together.
Well, you know, too, because there were so many churches in that neighborhood. There were so many churches in the neighborhood, and those steeples, they attract pigeons.
Yeah,
They used to so damn many pigeons in the
Yeah.
neighborhood, and some people raised them even.
yeah. They raised, that's
how
how,
I got the name.
that's how it got its name, because it's high up. If you don't know where Pigeon Hill, it's high up, elevation is high. And then as you would be driving and you look up, there was always pigeons.
Yeah.
All over. The Romanians, I believe, they raised them.
Church steeples everywhere, a lot of churches in that small
Yeah,
area.
yeah. Yeah.
And all Catholic, but they were all churches.
Yeah. Well,
Any other questions? Yeah, one more.
When and how did the Boxcar community dissolve?
When did
it dissolved in 1923, and I'm sorry, 1934, I'm sorry, 1934, it dissolved. Why was it? I'm not sure. It could have been that the Depression and the Mexican repatriation is when a lot of Mexicans left there. Might have been around that time. I'm not sure why it closed, but it could have very well been that a liability. It was a very dangerous place to live. It was toxic. It was a toxic industrial site. And I'm not sure, maybe it didn't become economically feasible for them. They could say, hey, we got all the work we wanted out of them, then sorry, but I don't know. It's never been documented as why it was dissolved. But when it dissolved, which is a good point, the Mexican community also dissolved, because that was the Mexican community. And it was not until about 1959 that it really started up again. But that 1934 is when it closed.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Just a reminder that if you'd like to purchase a book, they are available at the back. Exhibit is out in the atrium, and let's thank Dr. Benavides one more time.